In this podcast episode, Theo interviews Bassem Youssef, an Egyptian-born comedian, political commentator, writer, and former medical surgeon. Known as the Jon Stewart of the Arab world, Youssef has been vocal about the Israel-Palestine conflict for years. He gained widespread attention after a viral appearance on Piers Morgan's show. Youssef spent 19 years in medicine before transitioning to comedy. The Egyptian Revolution of 2011 sparked his interest in political satire. Inspired by Jon Stewart, he began making YouTube videos mocking state media's conspiracy theories. His content quickly gained millions of views, leading to television opportunities. Youssef's show became the biggest in the Middle East, attracting 40 million viewers per episode. However, he faced censorship, threats, and legal challenges from multiple regimes. In 2014, Youssef left Egypt for the United States. He experienced a significant career setback, going from a hugely popular figure to an unknown entity in a new country. He struggled with the language barrier and cultural differences in comedy. He started with open mics and gradually built his reputation through speaking engagements at universities. The COVID-19 pandemic provided unexpected opportunities for stage time, even with small audiences. Youssef provides a historical context for the Israel-Palestine conflict, tracing it back to the early 20th century. He explains the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which supported establishing a Jewish homeland in Palestine. He discusses the displacement of Palestinians, the formation of Israel in 1948, and subsequent conflicts. He argues that the occupation of Palestinian territories is the root cause of ongoing tensions. Youssef criticizes the American media's portrayal of the conflict, particularly following the October 7, 2023 attack by Hamas. He claims that many stories about Israeli casualties were exaggerated or fabricated, citing instances where Israeli media later debunked these reports. He expresses frustration with the difficulty of questioning or criticizing Israel in American discourse without facing accusations of anti-Semitism. The podcast delves into the relationship between the United States and Israel. Youssef questions the extent of U.S. support for Israel, both financially and politically. He discusses AIPAC, American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and its influence on U.S. politics. He argues that this relationship negatively impacts American democracy and freedom of speech regarding the Israel-Palestine conflict. Youssef shares his experiences as a Muslim immigrant in America and how the Israel-Palestine conflict affects his life and career. He discusses the challenges of maintaining friendships with Jewish colleagues while disagreeing on political issues. He emphasizes the importance of distinguishing between criticism of Israeli policies and anti-Semitism. The conversation touches on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Youssef describes the destruction of hospitals, schools, and civilian infrastructure. He expresses concern about the high civilian death toll and the displacement of Palestinians. He argues that Israel's military actions go beyond self-defense and amount to collective punishment of Palestinians. Youssef and the host discuss the fear of speaking openly about the Israel-Palestine conflict due to potential career repercussions. They explore the concept of cancel culture and its impact on public discourse. Youssef advocates for the ability to criticize any country's policies without fear of being labeled as bigoted or facing professional consequences. The podcast briefly touches on potential solutions to the conflict. Youssef emphasizes the need to end the occupation and treat Palestinians as equals. He acknowledges the complexity of the situation and the long-lasting impact of decades of conflict. The conversation explores the challenges of achieving a lasting peace given the history of violence and mistrust between the two sides. Youssef encourages listeners to question narratives presented in the media and seek out diverse perspectives on the conflict. He stresses the importance of understanding the historical context and recognizing the human cost of ongoing violence. The discussion highlights the need for media literacy and critical thinking when consuming news about complex international issues. Youssef argues that the Israel-Palestine conflict has far-reaching effects on American politics and society. He discusses how foreign lobbies influence domestic policies and questions whether this aligns with democratic principles. The conversation explores the tension between supporting allies and maintaining an independent foreign policy. Throughout the podcast, Youssef shares personal reflections on his journey from Egypt to America and his evolving perspective on freedom of speech. He expresses disappointment in feeling constrained in discussing certain topics in the U.S., contrasting it with his expectations of American freedom. Youssef reflects on his use of comedy to address serious political and social issues. He discusses how humor can be a powerful tool for highlighting absurdities and contradictions in political narratives. The podcast explores the balance between entertainment and education in political comedy. Throughout the discussion, Youssef emphasizes the importance of recognizing the humanity of all people involved in the conflict. He calls for greater empathy towards Palestinian civilians and criticizes dehumanizing rhetoric used to justify violence. The conversation touches on the universal desire for safety, dignity, and self-determination. The podcast briefly touches on issues of international law and human rights in the context of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Youssef argues that Israel's actions in Gaza violate international norms and questions why there isn't more accountability on the global stage.